Again. Hello, everyone. Sorry for being on mute. Thank you for joining us today for our first webinar on environmental standards and certifications in sport. And this is our first webinar of 6 in our Erasmus Games project, which I'll explain a little bit very shortly. We've got 2 wonderful guest speakers today who will talk us through some of the work they're doing around incorporating environmental standards and certifications in sports events and organizations. Bob Ramsak is the head of sustainability for World Athletics, and Tiberio Daddi is the associate professor at the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies. My name is Matthew Campelli, and I'm the sustainability partner at Touchline, and I'll be your moderator for today. Now, over the course of the next hour or so, with our speakers and through question and answer session, we'll be able to learn a couple of key learning topics. The first one Bob is going to take us through is how World Athletics is developing its own standard based on ISO 2012-1 and how they're incorporating sustainability standards within their events and their organization. And then we'll find out a little bit about some other standards and certifications like ISO 14001, EMAS and the EU Ecolabel, and crucially how they can be applied to sports organizations. And then we'll take a little look about how you can practically apply some of these standards and certifications to your event and organization. Before we begin, just a little bit about our Games project, which is a project which is funded by the EU through the Erasmus Plus program. And the partners in this project include the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies and World Athletics, which are represented by Bob and Tiberio, but also the International Biathlon Union, International Floorball Federation, Swedish Floorball Federation, and Touchline, who are the dissemination partners who I represent. Over the course of these 6 webinars, we'll hear from each of our partners around a number of topics around sustainability and sport. In our Games project, we have 5 key objectives, mostly around decarbonisation in sport. The first one is how we can raise awareness and increase the adoption of climate change mitigation practices by key sports actors. We're also analysing the current climate change governance and management models adopted in athletics, biathlon and floorball, and seeing how they can develop a path towards decarbonisation in each of their sports. We're also supporting all 3 sports with strategic objectives, programs and operational frameworks as they attempt to decarbonise. Like this webinar, we'll be developing training modules to improve the environmental knowledge and awareness for sports organisation employees and supporters, and crucially be leveraging the popularity of each of these sports to increase environmental awareness. Now we'll be doing a Q&A at the very end of this session, the two sections that Bob and Tiberio will be presenting on, but please feel free to ask questions throughout the whole of the webinar, and I'll ask questions as and when we go through each of the presentations. So don't be afraid to ask. We'll try and have plenty of time to ask questions, and be liberal with your questions. Please feel free to ask. So I will turn this over to Tiberio, who will be our first speaker. Tiberio, please feel free to share your screen and to give your presentation, and I'll hand the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Hello to everyone, also from my side. As Matthew was saying, the aim of my presentation is to give you a brief overview of what environmental certification are. Okay, sorry for the mistake in the title. And then in the last slide, I will show you some example and some case of application regarding the certification that we will speak about in the first part of the presentation. So speaking about environmental certification, the main and key categorization of the environmental certification are these 2 kind of certification. So we can speak about process certification and product certification. What is changed in the frame of these 2 big families of certification is the scope of the certification. So in the case of the process certification, we are certifying the organization. So let's say that this certification is applied to the whole activities of a certain organization, including a sport organization. The example that will provide you an overview in this presentation are EMAS and ISO 40001 certification that probably are the most known certification for organization. The other family of certification that we will be focused today are the product certification. In this case, the scope of the certification is certain products or services produced or delivered by a certain organization. So the difference between process and product certification is rightly the scope. So in a organization, for example, you can have certain products certified with, in this case, the focus will be on European Ecolabel, but these products could represent, for example, only a part of the wool products produced by an organization. So it could happen that also 2 or 3% of the total products are certified, but not the rest of the product of a certain organization. On the contrary, in the process certification, you are obliged to certify the whole organization and all activities. I put here the ISO 20121 in the middle because actually this kind of certification is more a process certification, so is applied to the organization that want implement a sustainable events management system and certify it. However, the certification, I was saying, is in the middle because it's, you can also, according to this certification, apply to a certain event and not to the whole organization. And in that case, you are almost in a case of a product or a service organization. So, and in that case, the certification expires with the end of the event. So let's look to the process certification. What are EMAS and ISO 40001? Probably are the main important certification for organization, main important in terms of relevance, in terms of diffusion, and in terms of, let's say, historical background. We will see in the next slide that are more than 20 years that operate, actually almost 30 years that they operate in the market. They are applicable to all organizations. So there are no limitation in terms of organization. Service organization, manufacturing organization can apply and can obtain this kind of environmental certification. As environmental certification, they are certified by a third-party verifier that are accredited by a certain system that assess and verify the competence of this verifier that issue the environmental certification. And these environmental certification are periodically assessed. So after the obtainment of the certification, the organization must yearly demonstrate that the certification is applied and is effective in achieving certain objectives. The two certifications are based on two different standards. EMAS is a public regulation, is a regulation of the European Commission. So the EMAS could be called as the European Commission certification, while ISO 40001 is issued and updated periodically by the International Standardization Organization for Standardization. As I was mentioned, they have been published more than 20 years ago. EMAS, the first version in 1993, the first version of ISO 40001 in 1996. They are both in their third revision. What this figure explains is that, as you can see here, some arrow that join ISO 40001 in EMAS, because starting from 2001, ISO 40001 is part of EMAS certification. So if you obtain EMAS certification, you must be compliant with all the ISO 40001 requirements. And for this reason, in somehow EMAS has been considered as a step further in terms of requirements compared to ISO 40001. What are the key principles of this process certification? Here you find the list. First, they are voluntary instruments. So even if there are some, let's say, policymakers and that invite companies to obtain or to achieve this kind of certification to guarantee a certain respect of the environment in the management of their activities, they remain, however, instruments that the organization adhere to through a voluntary way. Another key principle is the prevention of pollution. So according to this environmental certification, adopting this environmental certification, the organization should be focused on the prevention of pollution with action like eco-design, with action like substitution of chemicals in their activity, in their production process, or reusing products and raw material, instead of to find solution that aim to treat, to abate, and to reduce the pollution at the end of their process or at the end of their activities. Another key principle is the compliance with the environmental legislation. This is the starting point for all organizations that want to obtain EMAS or ISO 40001. So a huge amount of time from the verifier are dedicated to the verification of the mandatory requirements that can be applied to the organization that want to obtain this certification. So thinking to a sport organization, for example, a football club that have to manage, for example, natural grass pitches. We are speaking about environmental legislation, for example, like the permit that this organization must obtain to use, for example, underground water for irrigation, and so the limits that they have to respect for these permits, or for example the limits of noise emission that all sport event should respect, or also for example the requirements refer to the prevention of fire that are part of this environmental legislation, part of the environmental certification. Then these two environmental certification don't have any threshold to be compliant with in order to obtain the certification. However, both the standard imply and impose a continuous improvement of environmental performance. So the verifier are invited to verify that in every year new goals, new objectives, and this continuous improvement of environmental performance is achieved by the organization that has the certification. Otherwise, this certification cannot be renewed, cannot be confirmed in the yearly verification that we were mentioned before. Then, especially in EMAS, and this is a difference between the two schemes, there is a clear invitation to the organization to have transparency, to have open dialogue with the external stakeholder, to make available environmental statements, so a sort of a sustainability report where they publish their environmental data. Why an organization should obtain EMAS and ISO 40001, and what are the benefits? We have in our university in past studies and projects carried out a lot of survey, a lot of interview with certified environmental organization, and it emerged from this research that a key benefit from EMAS and ISO 40001 is referred to the capacity to manage the environmental issue. So an organization that has adopted an environmental management system according to this standard, they increase strongly the capacity to manage environmental issue, including legal compliance. Then there are other drivers, there are other benefits like the increase of market competitiveness through the reduction of cost, through the improvement of performance, or to respond to requests from clients, or naturally to the increase of the reputation to our institutional stakeholder, like inspection agency, like governments, like municipalities, or also to our other stakeholder like suppliers or industrial and trade association. So we were discussing about what are the similarities and what are the key principles, but so what are the key difference between these two environmental certification? One I mentioned before in one of the first slides. EMAS is based on a public regulation, so has a public nature, and it is managed by the European Commission, while ISO 40001 is private. ISO has been since the beginning valid at the international level, while EMAS, being an European regulation, was valid at the beginning when it has been issued only at the European level, but now since 2009 it's valid also at international level. They have differences in terms of external communication. EMAS has a mandatory requirement regarding external communication through the publication of an environmental statement, the report that I was mentioning before, where all EMAS organizations must make available to the public the data, the performance that they have achieved, the objective that they have set, while this external communication is not mandatory, is optional in ISO 40001. In addition, we will see some number in the next slides. EMAS has a lower diffusion, while ISO 40001 has a much wider diffusion compared to EMAS. How they work? They are based on the diamond cycle. So what it means? It means that to apply this environmental certification in your organization, you have to adopt a plan, do, check, act approach. A plan approach through the phase that here you see listed 1, 2, and 3. You have to do an environmental review. You have to identify your environmental impacts, not only your direct impacts, so the impacts that are under your full control, but also the indirect environmental impacts. So the impacts link, for example, with the supply chain, so with suppliers, with the logistics, and also with your customer that are using your product, or with your clients that are using your service in somehow. After this analysis, after this identification of priorities, you have to set an environmental improvement program where you put goals, you put objective, you specify budget to achieve this objective, and periodically you have to update and to check if you are achieving this objective. In the do phase, you have to implement an environmental management system. So you have to implement operational control measure, you have to implement a procedure, you have to implement training in order to make your environmental management system effective in achieving the environmental goals and objectives that you have set before. Then you have a check phase. Periodically, an organization that is certified must carry out an internal audit, so an internal control, in order to identify and to understand if the certification is working well and the objectives are achieved. And then after this control, you have to do an act phase where you take a decision on how to amend your environmental management system, how you adopt new action, how you adopt new rules and instruction in order to make more effective your environmental management system and to push the continuous improvement of your performance. That is a key principle, as we have seen in the previous slides regarding this environmental certification. As I was saying, the numbers are particularly different. Here you can see that regarding EMAS, we can speak about 12,000 of sites registered EMAS, while ISO 40001 has 500,000 sites and 300,000 certificates. So let's say that the number and the spread of this certification is particularly different. What about product certification? So speaking about product certification from ISO standard point of view, we can speak about three different kind of certification. You have product certification of type 1, that the so-called labels, green labels, where you have to obtain this certification through a third-party verification, and this third-party verification is aimed to verify the respect and the compliance of your product to certain criteria and so to certain thresholds. So the verifier come and check if in the production of your products, if your products have certain environmental characteristics. Are part of this family of labels, the European Ecolabel, that in the next slides we will see, we will go a little more in depth, but also other kind of label like the Blue Angel, that is a German Ecolabel, or the Nordic one, that is a label managed in Scandinavian countries, but actually spread at the whole European level. The type 2 label are self-declaration. Environmental claims are in somehow a declaration that follow a certain standard, ISO standard, but are not third party certified, while the declaration and the environmental product claims that are third-party certified are the product certification of the type 3. Here, on the contrary, on type 1, you don't have any threshold and any requirement to be compliant with. You have only to obtain a certification on the performance of your product. So you realized, following some rules, a declaration and a third-party verifier put its certification on the performance of your product or your service that you have included in the environmental declaration. The EU Ecolabel has been established in 1992, again through a European regulation. So like EMAS is a product certification of public of European Commission. The EU Ecolabel works through a certain list of criteria that are established by specific European decision. So the European Commission establishes what are the requirements and the criteria for certain products to obtain this environmental certification. These criteria that are fixed through different European decision take into account the whole life cycle of the product or of the service. So they establish criteria not only for the impact of this product during the use phase, but also during the production, during the packaging and transport. They put some requirements regarding raw materials, and they put also requirements regarding the quality of this product and the performance that they have to achieve from quality point of view. So take into account that the European Commission for this kind of label, the European Ecolabel, have to publish some decision to set the criteria and to set the requirements. Not all the products can obtain this label. Here you have the products groups that can be certified. They are cleaning, clothing and textile, coverings, and we can see that there are also some service, holiday accommodation. Clearly now in this case you don't have sport, let's say, products or let's say sport event that can be certified through European Ecolabel. On the contrary, like ISO 40001 and EMAS that are applicable to all organizations. But we will see in the final slide when I will speak about some example of application of this certification in sport. This, however, can be used, this label can be used in terms of obtain and selection of certain products that can be used in the frame of the sport activity. Like, for example, here we can see the cleaning products. These are product categories where the Ecolabel can be applied, and in the frame of each product category you could have different kind of products. So we have seen before the cleaning products category. In the frame of the cleaning products, here you can see list different cleaning products, dishwater detergents, indoor cleaning service, and so on. And in the frame of these different products, you can access to the European Commission website and identify the products, the producer, and the contacts of the organization that produce this kind of products certified with the European Ecolabel, that on the product they include the label of the European Commission Ecolabel. This is an example of what the European Ecolabel include. Here I put the decision regarding the EU Ecolabel criteria for dishwater detergents. As you can see, they have certain specific and technical threshold that must be compliant to the products that want to obtain the certification. For example, here you can see that they have requirement for toxicity, requirement for biodegradability, and so on. While here you have another decision regarding the criteria to obtain the European Ecolabel for tourist accommodation. And again, as you can see here, okay, here we don't have criteria, but also the category. You can identify in this decision some mandatory criteria that are referred to different topics like the capacity of the hotel or tourist accommodation to manage environmental issue, but also energy criteria, water criteria, wastewater criteria. And in the frame of these categories, you find certain specific criteria that establish practice, that establish thresholds to be respected to obtain the EU Ecolabel. The EU Ecolabel are quite spread. In Europe, you have in Europe almost 90,000 of different products certified. These products are managed by around 2,600 companies that has obtained a license. Naturally, the license are lower than the products. It means that in many cases, a company, an organization obtain a license, but in the frame of this license, they produce more than one product with that has obtained European Ecolabel. To complete my excursus in the environmental certification, the ISO 21121 is the event sustainability management system. I will not go through the criteria of this certification, because then we have World Athletics that in Bob, they are certified according to this standard. Probably they can provide more information. The characteristic of this standard is that compared to ISO 40001 and EMAS is the fact that is an event sustainability management and is not an environmental management, an environmental certification. So the focus of this standard is not only the environmental issues, but it includes the focus on the three, let's say, pillars of the sustainable development. So you have to take into account in managing this standard, social and economic and environmental impacts. So let's see, to complete my presentation, some cases of application of environmental certification in sport. Starting from ISO 40001. ISO 40001, we have seen how at the European level is more, let's say, spread compared to EMAS, and also in sport we can observe this situation. Even if ISO 40001 is not particularly spread in the sport organization, here we have some example, like for example the Romanian Football Federation that is certified according to ISO 40001, and actually the Portuguese Football Federation that has been involved in a previous project with us, or also the Allianz Stadium of Juventus has the certification ISO 40001, or the International Federation dell'Automobile that is certified as organization ISO 40001. As I was saying, the situation in sport regarding the differences between ISO 40001 and EMAS numbers mirror in somehow the situation that we can observe at the international level. So the unique stadium that, to the best of our knowledge at least, has an EMAS certification is the Ernst-Happel Stadium. That is the stadium where the national football team of Austria plays its matches and is in Wien. Hopefully, as I wrote, we have an ongoing project, another ongoing project that, similar to games, has objectives in terms of improvement, environmental management improvement in sport organization, in the frame of this project that is called Free Kicks, where you can see in the acronym we mentioned EMAS and Ecolabel as one of the two targets of the project. We have to bring to EMAS certification at least 3 sport organization, football class or federation in the frame of the sport organization that participate to the project. We are again also in this case lead applicant. We have FC Porto, we have Real Betis, we have Malmo, we have Racing, and we have the Romanian Federation, and 3 of these 5 organizations, we hope that at the beginning of 2025 will be EMAS registered thanks to the activity of this project. Regarding ISO 21121 is more spread, I would say, compared to ISO 40001 and EMAS in sport. Here we have some example like Roland Garros, like World Athletics, as I mentioned, like Wembley Stadium, or like Olympic Games in Rio, and also Olympic Games in Tokyo were certified according to this standard. Regarding Ecolabel, clearly, I mentioned before, you in this moment, there are no environmental criteria set by the European Commission in order to give an ecolabel to sport event or more in general to recreational events. But this kind of label can be used in the green procurement action. For example, in the selection of cleaning service provider or hotels. Here it is an example. This is a selection process of a new cleaning service provider adopted by Real Betis, a football club of the Spanish Liga. As you can see in the call for application for new service provider, they have put some criteria, environmental criteria, sorry, I had only the version in English, where they ask that the provider that apply to be the service, the new service provider for the club, they should have been somehow EMAS or ISO 40001, or they should use cleaning products certified according the European eco label that we have seen before. Another example, and I complete my presentation, is this procedure, this instruction that has been adopted by the Portuguese Football Federation in the frame of the ISO 40001. What it says, this selection, it regulates how will happen the selection of the hotels in the case of trip, in the case of mission of the first national team of futsal, the soccer, youth national team, male and female of football. In the frame of this instruction, you can see that the team service department is invited to discuss with the sustainability department in order to check the hotels that has an environmental certification with Ecolabel or with EMAS in order, let's say, to prefer in the arrangement of the competition, arrangement of the mission, the selection of the hotel. And so here in this instruction is invited to visit this website, that is the website of the European Commission, where you have a catalog of all tourist accommodation certified with Ecolabel. And so here you have naturally possibility to select or deselect the certification, the organization that has this, the tourist accommodation that has this certification. And so according to that procedure, the Football Federation of Portugal have to check this, let's say, map. And so if, for example, they have to go to Paris for a match, they can identify the hotel that they have an European ecolabel in order to check the possibility to book in this hotel, and so to use the EU ecolabel again as a way to do green procurement, in this case in the frame of the hotel selection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiberio. And for all of those who just tuned in a little bit late for that, don't worry, this is being recorded and will be shared shortly after the webinar finishes. Tiberio, just while Bob gets himself ready and gets his slides ready, well, one quick question. You talked about a few standards, ISO 14001, EMAS, Ecolabel. If there are any sports organizations watching this webinar, what is the process of deciding which type of standard you would go for? How would you decide something like that?
Yeah, let's say it depends on the reason, because we have seen that they are quite similar. What we observe in sport, but also in other sectors, also manufacturing sector, that ISO 40001 is identified as a first step in somehow to achieve then other steps like EMAS. So in order to select between ISO 40001 and EMAS, I will say probably I would suggest to start from ISO 40001 and then to look to EMAS. Regarding ISO 20121 we have seen how it is a wider environmental standard, it's a wider sustainable standard. It includes not only environmental aspects, but it includes also social and economic aspects. So if the objective of the organization, of the club, of the sport federation is to have an management system that is wider, that includes also economic and social aims, I would suggest to start from 20121. While European ecolabel in the green procurement action can be easily used and applied for different products, as I mentioned in my example. So I invite the sport organization to contact the purchasing procurement department and try to identify possibility to use this kind of certification in the procurement action.
Thanks, Tiberio. If there are any questions for Tiberio or ones are coming for Bob, please feel free. The Q&A box is open, the chat is open, so please put your questions in there. We'll have some time for questions, I believe, so please get them in, and we'll try and get through as many of them as possible. Meanwhile, though, I'm happy to hand over the floor over to Bob Ramsak, the head of sustainability at World Athletics, who'll talk a little bit about his journey. Bob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Tiberio, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Let me get my screen here. Okay, so when World Athletics set out to develop its sustainability strategy back in 2018, we knew that a critical element of that would be to bring all events under our remit along with us in order to create the widest possible front from across the sport to tackle together the triple planetary threat of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. So how are we planning to do that? By making all of these events re-examine how they're staged and begin a push towards a delivery model where sustainability becomes a key guiding principle. After 2 years of planning and outreach, that journey finally begins for us in January 2024 with the implementation of our Athletics for a Better World standard, which is an evaluation system that's at the core of the World Athletics sustainability strategy. So that's what I'll be talking about for the next few minutes this morning. But before getting into the nuts and bolts of the standard, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the evolution of our sustainability strategy, and why we decided that we needed to develop a standard that evaluates how sustainably organizers can deliver their events, which is what the Athletics for Better World standard is designed to do, and why we think it's crucial that all of our events take this on and take it to heart. Then we'll take a closer look at some of the things the standard includes and what we're hoping to achieve. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes left to take some of your questions. So to start, what does sustainability in athletics mean? For our purposes, in the context of our sport, athletics and distance running, sustainability needs to first account for the needs of future generations. It needs to ensure that actions take a balanced approach to their social, economic, and environmental impacts. It needs to provide a fair and level sporting platform based on sound ethical principles. And it needs to actively involve interested parties and stakeholders and be transparent and open about decisions and activities. That definition was the foundation of the sustainability strategy we unveiled in April 2020. Which is a 10-year roadmap whose goals include, among several other things, achieving carbon neutrality across all World Athletics operations and World Athletics Series events by 2030. It's designed to deliver tangible benefits across those three pillars of sustainability that we both mentioned with Tiberio, the environmental, the social, and the economic, by using the power of sport and athletics to accelerate athletics towards a sustainable future, thus contributing to a better world. That brings us to the why. Why are we doing this? I don't want to belabor the point, but we all know we are putting on global events during a global climate crisis. It is an existential crisis. The science is absolutely clear about the impacts of human activity on the climate and that urgent action is necessary. We cannot ignore that. Our sport has acutely been impacted over the past several years, and we're beginning to see a wider acknowledgement of that impact. We're not doing this because we think athletics can and will solve the climate crisis, but we do need to recognize that our events do have an impact on the environment, and we need to be a sport and industry taking concrete and meaningful action to address the crisis we face by using the influence we have. Increasingly, this is something that sponsors and other stakeholders are looking for, and it's something that our athletes want us to do as well. We conducted athlete surveys at each of our 4 World Championship events that we hosted in 2022. 737 athletes from 122 countries participated. These are all elite athletes, by the way. Some of the findings. 76% said they are either extremely concerned or very concerned about climate change. 72% said that climate change has already impacted our sport. And 90% said that World Athletics and its events do have a role to play to help build a more sustainable future. So to do that, we have to use our greatest asset in this fight, and that is through the way we put on our events. Oops. Sorry about that. It's kind of taken on a mind of its own. Let me start that. Apologies for this. Sorry about that. Okay, so to do that, we have to use the greatest asset we have in this fight, and that is through the way we put on our events. When we speak of events, we mean those that we own, such as our 6 World Championship events, and those we jointly manage, grant permits for, or otherwise have an influence on, like the Wine to Diamond League series of the world's best one-day athletics competitions, or the label road races that include the World Marathon Majors. In 2023, 472 events from 85 countries on 6 continents were part of our label and tour event series. Those events reached tens of thousands of people in the communities hosting them, and collectively hundreds of millions more around the world who watch and follow them. Many of these are the largest and most important annual sporting events hosted in their cities. Many are firmly rooted in their communities, with visibility year-round and activities that stretch well beyond their annual event. Our sports influence in those events is packaged in the examples we set, through the ways we stage and deliver our competitions, by the lasting community partnerships we forge, and through the sponsors we choose to associate with. When you amplify that influence through platforms that are driven by the unique power that sport can provide, you truly have a powerful delivery mechanism to help drive the changes our global emergency requires. Which is why, kind of in a nutshell, big nutshell, why we're asking all the events we're involved with to join us on this journey. Which now brings us to the how in this equation, which in turn brings us back briefly to the World Athletics Sustainability Strategy. That strategy was developed by identifying World Athletics key areas of impact and identifying where our strongest influence lies. And as we've already determined, that lies in how we stage our events. We then designed a strategy that keys in on that, broken down into 6 further pillars or focus areas, which are, first, leadership and sustainability, an aim to be a recognized driver in sport sustainability by promoting sustainability across the entire sport. A large part of that means embedding sustainable principles into our events, our daily operations, and our sponsorship and partnership agreements. Second pillar is sustainable production and consumption, which means to positively manage the impact of our procurement and to ensure that we're minimizing any social or environmental impact from the procurement of products and services. It also means maximizing local impact around our events, local economic impact around our events. The third pillar is climate change and carbon. This mainly revolves around a transition to carbon neutrality by 2030 across all of our operations. That's at our HQ and across all of our World Championship events. That includes implementing a sustainable travel policy, including the sanctioned events commit to carbon neutrality targets, and identifying credible means to offset unavoidable emissions. The fourth pillar is local environment and air quality. This is to ensure that the environmental conditions that enable individuals to participate safely. Global equality is the fifth pillar. We want to demonstrably share our skills around the world so we can help create and expand recognized opportunity pathways for both genders in all professions in athletics. That includes athletes, coaches, technical officials, and administrators across a wider geography. And finally, diversity, accessibility, and well-being. This pillar aims to ensure that athletics is and remains open to everyone and safe for everyone. Which now brings us to the how in this equation. To embed principles of sustainability into delivery of our events, actions around each of these pillars were built into two tools that we developed. The first is a sustainable event management system, or SEMS, which we call, which offers best practice guidance in 15 key areas of event planning and delivery. And the second is our Athletics for a Better World standard. It's a certification that evaluates, measures, and scores an event's achievement in sustainable delivery, and most importantly, in our terms, delivering the event in alignment with the 6 pillars that frame our sustainability strategy. The SEMS begins with advice on how to develop a sustainability plan if one doesn't already exist, and includes chapters that cover pretty much every facet of an event's delivery. It looks at procurement, waste management, energy, food and water management, travel and accommodation planning, diversity, accessibility, inclusion of staff and volunteers is also addressed. So is ensuring the health, safety, and well-being of all participants and stakeholders. Then it concludes with guidance on monitoring, reporting, and finally communicating about some of the work organizers are doing and the successes they've achieved. All of these components aim to reduce impact where necessary and improve impact where necessary. Given our global remit as an international federation, it wasn't possible to create a one-size-fits-all package, but we did endeavor to make it as relevant and applicable across as wide a geography as possible. We also connect organizers with local experts whenever we can. We've also translated it into 16 languages now to ensure that most of the world's population can give it a careful read. And alongside that is the Athletics for a Better World standard, or the ABW standard as we call it, which is the scoring and evaluation tool. It consists of 42 action areas, with 120 total available points. It's a tiered system with platinum, gold, silver, bronze, and recognized event achievement levels that will eventually have to be met as part of the evaluation process of all World Athletics licensed or permitted events from 2024. Cities bidding to host upcoming World Championship World Athletics Series events, for which bids launched in the first half of 2023, will be required to commit to a gold level achievement, making sustainability a core feature of all future World Athletics Championships. It's also scalable so that any event at any level, from a local park run or a club track meeting to a national or world championship, should be able to achieve the highest standard of sustainable event achievement. Through close engagement with our 214 member federations, those events will also be encouraged to use the standard. But the sustainability management system that World Athletics has developed, which was certified to ISO 2012-1 in April of this year, provided us with the framework we needed to manage and deliver our sustainability strategy. And that includes developing and driving the ABW standard. The standard sets the outcomes we want our events to achieve in order to deliver on World Athletics priorities. So the ABW standard is very much output-led. It's aligned with our strategic sustainability priorities and measures the outcomes and impacts that the event is delivering on. I'll talk about from piloting to implementation. Since it was unveiled in December 2021, organizers of nearly 300 one-day competition series events and label road races have been introduced to the system. Several dozen piloted the system and standard in 2022, and we're expecting about 100 to pilot it again by the end of 2023, which really has provided us with a lot of valuable input prior to its implementation before January. And as I said, the system's also being incorporated into delivery of all World Athletics Championships and increasingly into all of our World Athletics Series events. Organizers of the World Athletics Championship Budapest 23, which took place last August, were the first local organizing committee to fully embrace the standard, giving it a real full throttle test run at the recently held championships in the Hungarian capital. Organizers of the World Athletics Indoor Championships Glasgow 24, set for March, have also announced very strong ambitions in delivering against the standard. Planning meetings with sustainability leads for the 2025 World Championships in Tokyo are already underway. So we are increasingly getting started earlier and earlier in the process. Implementation is going to have different objectives depending on the event category. For instance, annually held events, such as those that are part of the Wanda Diamond League, the Continental Tour, or labeled road race events, will be able to set a longer-term target and objectives to chart their progress year on year. World Athletics Championships events will focus on both strong delivery and the sustainability legacy that they can create for their host venues and cities. Providing resource and guidance really is an important part of how we're helping to drive all this forward. Besides the SEM's best practice guidance, World Athletics has and continues to offer ongoing guidance with a series of webinars and info sessions for race and event organizers conducted by experts in their respective fields. We're continuing to expand the resource center on the World Athletics website, which will also host regularly updated information hub of case studies and best practice examples that we want to share from other events. We're also working regularly on identifying athletes who are interested in engaging more around sustainability and issues that are important to them, and then putting them in touch with event organizers to come up with creative ways that they can work together. Other resources we have a regularly updated sustainability section on our website, and an e-learning course, on the pillars of our sustainability strategy. It's currently available in 3 languages with more to come in 2024. And we'll also continue to provide support for organizers via one-on-one meetings, our ongoing webinar series, and a wider range of e-learning modules with visits to live events. I'm conscious of time, but I want to spend just a couple more minutes digging a little bit deeper into the standard itself to give you an idea of what it is we're expecting. As you can see here, the standard is divided into 6 areas that align with the 6 pillars of our strategy, with a total of 120 points available. Of those points are mandatory, and as you can see, a key part of that is around planning and assigning the roles and responsibilities so that sustainability firmly becomes embedded into each functional area, so that it eventually does become business as usual. Current format is an Excel document. My apologies that you can't see this well. Sorry about having some problems sharing this morning. Basically, it lists each action, the points available, the objectives, the scoring methodology, associated guidance, and then a workspace for organizers to do their planning. We are developing an online reporting form, which will launch in January. Each event will have their own form with a self-reporting area and a planning area as well. So I know we only have 5 minutes left. I'll stop there. And now, Andrew, Matthew, if you want to take over. Thank you.
Hey, Bob, thank you very much. That was a really, really in-depth presentation. Thank you. We do have a couple of questions to finish off. And we have one question, which is from Caroline, which I think was directed to Tiberio, but I think this could be applicable for both of you, actually. Maybe, Bob, you can actually start with this one. The question is does lining up with standards like ISO 20001 or ISO 14001, does it make it more difficult to identify and align environmental strategies with potential partners, for example? So maybe Bob, maybe you can kick us off with that, and Tiberio, we can come on to you after Bob has his initial thoughts.
Well, I can say part of our ABW standard, we are sort of directing organizers to any other standards that may be applicable, like some of the ones that Tiberio mentioned earlier, like the Ecolabel for hotels, for accommodations. As far as some of our commercial sponsors and others who are other stakeholders, they are very interested in this. They are setting up, they all have their own plans in place. They are trying to figure out what kind of standards apply to them as well. So I see this as kind of a way to really kind of continue working together and collaborating.
Tiberio, what do you think?
Yeah, not much to add to Bob. I fully agree with him. So the standard, as I was mentioning, asks to target indirect aspect, not only the direct aspect. So the aspect, the environmental impact originated by the activity. So sponsor activity or relation or activity with this kind of stakeholder are part of the indirect impact that the ISO EMAS ask to adopt and to implement and to target. And so it could be a good opportunity to activate activities in the frame of the environmental certification with this big organization that often are themselves certify according ISO standard or EMAS. So if you discuss with them in the frame of this system, surely they know what is the language that you are speaking.
Tiberio, a specific question for you from Rika, which is, why did the Free Kicks project, the project that you mentioned earlier in the presentation, why did it choose EMAS over other alternatives? Why was EMAS the choice?
Yeah, the answer is quite easy. We choose EMAS and ECOLABEL because they are European Commission certification, in addition also to be relevant, naturally, as I mentioned. And Free Kicks is an European funding program, like games, funded in the frame of the Erasmus Plus program. So in somehow, I don't say that we are obliged, but we have decided to target these instruments and tools that are of the European Commission in the frame of our European funding program. However, also in that project, the organization that will obtain EMAS, probably they will decide also to obtain ISO 40001, because as I was mentioning, ISO 40001 is part of EMAS, and so obtaining EMAS, they can also get that kind of certification.
We have two good questions from Sophie and from Jamie, which are applicable to both of you. But before, there's one from Georg, who's got one specific for Bob. And Georg's question is, how does World Athletics define the scope of its carbon event footprinting, and how does it monitor it thereafter?
Well, that'll be different for the events. Each event, at this point, for our World Championship events, there is a sustainability team that's working, and they will be defining their own carbon footprint for the event. We're sort of taking responsibility for the travel, athlete travel specifically. These are our World Championships. Athletes travel long distances to get there, so that's really part of. We are taking ownership of that specifically.
Question for both of you from Jamie. Maybe Tiberio, we can start with you. He's asking, what are the trade-offs, financial trade-offs, operational trade-offs that you have to consider when implementing a standard or certification?
Yeah, the trade-off and the connection between these aspects are clearly, from one side, you can identify an investment that you have to do, as in all, let's say, environmental strategy, because you have to dedicate time. Probably you need a consultant that help you if you don't have an European project, like in our case, in the project I mentioned. And naturally, to achieve the continuous improvement is a request to you to set some objectives, some goals, and so to also use some budget to achieve these goals. But clearly, you have to consider the economic and financial benefit that you can get, apart the reputation that whoever, okay, probably it's a sort of intangible financial benefit. It's harder to identify a revenue from this kind of benefit, but a lot of cases demonstrate how to implement this system. You achieve better performance, and achieving better performance, you also save cost, and so you increase competitiveness in this frame. So there are, let's say, a sort of trade-off regarding more cost, but also more competitiveness that you can achieve. So in the end, it's it's a decision that many organizations, many companies, not only sport, but also manufacturing, take also for economic aims, not only for, let's say, environmental sensitiveness or awareness.
We've just gone over time, but there's a couple more questions specific to Bob, which I will pass over. First one is from Sophie. And Sophie, this probably relates to some of the stuff in your presentation, Bob, but Sophie's asking that outside of events and certification, what actions are sports federations taking to put pressure on other stakeholders to enact sustainability? So outside of events, I know you talk about events as a key thing, but what else are you kind of seeing?
Well, fortunately, I can't really answer that directly because so much of our work really is around events. And I guess I do know that there are sponsors asking specifically about what we're doing around sustainability and how they can become involved. So that's really kind of where our focus is. I know that doesn't really directly answer the question, but
maybe specific to the empowering athletes potentially as well, like not just events, but also what you can do as an organization, but also give athletes a platform potentially.
Yeah, we found this to be quite impactful. We, the Champions for a Better World program that we began last year, that we are continuing next year, has been quite good. It's really, as you saw with some of the statistics that I shared earlier with athletes, that they're concerned, really very, very concerned about these things. And they do want to see their events. They do want to see our sport taking an active and even a leading role in this. So that's been really good. Athletes, kind of share on their social media primarily, things events are doing, things events are trying to do. And they're also become quite good at getting their peers more involved and getting their peers more aware of some of the things that we're trying to do and some of the things we're implementing. So athletes really have a key role in this. I think a lot of other sports are truly trying to figure out how to best involve athletes as well.
Just to finish up, we've got two more questions, one from Georg and one from Ellie, and I'll try and kind of wrap them up so we can finish these off because they're mainly posed at you, Bob. So one question is, how does World Athletics envision becoming carbon neutral by 2030? And what is your kind of view on offsetting? What percentage do you think kind of offsetting will impact that target? And then Ellie's asking at the same time, does the Athletes for a Better World standard align with the Sports for Climate Action framework, other frameworks like Sport for Nature, for example?
The latter part, it does. It does take bits and pieces of all of those, and we do direct all of our organizers, to some of that, and that's also addressed in some of the other webinars specific to different functional areas that we're doing. The first part about carbon neutrality, it's the same question. It's the same issue that all the other sports are dealing with right now. These are going to be very difficult targets. I think a lot of organizations are really seeing how difficult these targets really are. And it's clear we're not going to be able to do this on our own. It's clear we have to figure out ways to involve industries. We need industries to help move this along. A lot of it is travel related. Things like offsets, we are carefully exploring those as well. I don't know at the moment what our target is going to be. For the moment, we are offsetting our HQ travel. But where that's going to land us, I'll be quite honest, I don't know what it's looking like in 28 or 29, and I don't think too many other sport organizations really know what that looks like at the moment as well.
That segues us nicely into our wrap up for today's webinar. For anyone interested in carbon and aspects of carbon and carbon management, our next webinar is on the 21st of November at 11 o'clock CET, and the topic will be carbon and environmental footprint calculations for sports events. So please put that in your calendar. We'll be sending out information around that in the coming weeks. But apart from that, thank you very much to all of you for joining us today for the webinar, and thank you for your questions. Big thank you to Tiberio Daddi and Bob Ramsak for their presentations, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you. Goodbye.